Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Studio 78 podcast. I am your host, Nishay from NishaySnow.com. Welcome. You can find the show notes for this page over at NACHESNOW.com/68. If you do me a huge favor, no matter where you're listening from, if you could just hit that subscribe button, be it iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, you name it, please hit subscribe. And if you have a chance, please rate me 5 stars. That would be great. It helps people discover the podcast. Okay, so this is Columbus Day weekend, which is crazy pants because that means it is less than 90 days until the new year, which is crazy. But I think that's the perfect time for this episode because in this episode, I am talking to Elise Russell, the owner of Pony Friday. And usually, on the episodes, I'm like, hey, I'm not pushing people one way or the other to quit their job, not to quit the job. Everybody has to figure out like if they want to do something as a side hustle or if they want to kind of just go for it and then quit their jobs and then start a new business. And so I try to make sure I have guests that provide that balance. So today I'm giving you someone who might give you the push you need to quit your job if it makes sense for you. Because sometimes people do get stuck in their jobs and they are so comfortable that they're afraid to actually maybe follow their dreams, learn something new, do something new, start a new business, or even just go to another company and find more fulfilling work. And so I have Elise on here just to talk a little bit about behaving boldly because that is exactly what she did. She quit her job as an award-winning advertising creative to be an entrepreneur. She didn't have any plan whatsoever. She just knew that something needed to change in her life and she went for it and it worked out. It doesn't always work out for everybody, of course, but sometimes you do, just have to take that risk and see what happens. She did, and it paid off for her. And so in this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about how that evolved, what she started doing initially because she knew it would make money to what she's doing now, which is like selling products. She runs a Behave Boldly boot camp, and she also has gotten into some speaking engagements too. So it's just amazing to hear her story and how it's involved. So this is really just like a conversation between entrepreneurs, just talking about how kind of life shifts and when to be bold. Like when should you? Like what are the signs that what are the signs that you should look for really that kind of give you that indicator like, hey, you know what? It's time to do something new. So, without further ado, here's Elise. Hello, Elise. Welcome to the Studio 78 podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So, before we get into Pony Friday, which is really cool, can you just kind of go back in time a little bit and tell the listeners a little bit about you before Pony Friday?
Yeah, well, the most recent was that I was in creative departments of ad agencies. And I think that that's kind of where it started for me as a professional. I mean, I'd gone to school for fine arts and then for business, and then I transitioned to doing advertising, and I did some schooling for that. And so started my career in creative departments. And I was really successful as far as ticking all the boxes that, a creative would want to, having a good portfolio and winning awards. And I started off as an art director, and then I transitioned to a copywriter, which was actually easier than it should be for anyone. So that just kind of, I think I lucked out that I was at a good way with words.
Yeah, that's like 2 different sides of the brain.
Totally. So when I said I was the weird kid, I think that covers it. And just, I got really frustrated because I was always looking for room to grow and room to evolve. And I just felt like I had reached a constricting point where I wasn't, like I kind of figured out the whole art direction, succeeded in that, creative writing, succeeding in that. And then I quit my full-time job to own my time a little bit more. Like I was just frustrated with the work I was doing and the clients I was doing, and I wanted to actually have a lot more control and say over what projects that I took on and the hours that I worked. Because sometimes I'm really productive in the morning or late at night and not necessarily in the 9 to 5 window. And that was really frustrating working in agencies because it's like you'd have to really be at most of your agency jobs during normal work hours, even if you were
Right.
doing most of your work later. And so I quit and then ended up just being a hired gun. So I was a contractor, pretty much
Mm.
owning my job, but it hadn't really changed other than I would say yes and no to working on different projects at different times. But the role hadn't really changed. And
Right.
so I did some creative direction contracts, which was great, but it just wasn't where I wanted to be. Like when you think of those people higher up in your industry, and are you really working towards taking over their jobs at some point? And the answer for
Mm-hmm.
me was always, I don't want to be like them. And that's hard. So, kind of like flailing around and finding my own path. And really, I always describe Pony Friday as just like a creative whim that got carried away.
Right. And then, too, just curious, how many years roughly were you in those positions before you were like, you know what? I need something different?
Well, that's a good question. Do you like how many years was I like an art director
Yeah,
versus
like just, yeah, combine like the art director and the copywriter.
I was probably in those roles um let's see, like including like some of the contract stuff I did, probably 12 years.
Yeah, so and I just asked that question too, just to kind of give people some context. Like it wasn't like you were like 3 years in and like, okay, I'm out.
No,
But it was
well,
like a
yeah,
decade, right? Of like really putting time and effort into all these positions.
totally. Oh, and I turned 40 this fall. So, like, honestly, it's good to ask those questions because I always just can't figure out, like, I'm like, how did these people do this stuff and how old are they and how long did it take them to achieve stuff? And so I'm always like, this is how old I am, okay?
Yeah, no, because sometimes people think things, and you know, I totally with you. I just turned 40 in March. I'm like, oh my God, 40. It's kind of crazy. But yeah, I love giving people that context because, I mean, some people might, make that decision early on, but just, I think it's just good to know like somebody's story. Like, no, they were, working a 9 to 5 for several years before they're like, you know what, let me try something different. Yeah.
Oh, totally. Well, and I'm all about trying something different. I just ran against a roadblock recently because I don't have a degree. So I have 6 years of post-secondary, but no degree. And they
Um,
were looking for someone to fill this position on personal branding. And I really have the best experience to do this. And so I was going through ticking all the boxes. And then there was a formality of like, let's just fill out this form. What's your degree in? And I laughed and I said, I don't have one. So it's just, and I didn't end up getting the position because that was one of the things they needed to tick off. And I thought it's
Oh.
really interesting that we have all these systems. And as a creative, I've just never subscribed to the systems in society. And going through the path of just, like I started off in fine art studies, realized that that wasn't the path I wanted to be on, and
Mhm.
moved into like a business diploma and got that kind of business stuff because you can always use some business sense. And now that I'm an entrepreneur, that's been super helpful. But then I did advertising. So, like, all of the things to get me to where I am and where I needed to go, it would have been wasted had I spent another couple years finishing a degree on something that I didn't care about.
Yeah, and that's interesting too because like with like your years of experience, you would think like that would kind of trump having to have an official degree, because you can have a degree and not be good at what you do, you know?
Oh, well, and it didn't even matter what I could have had a degree in testing animal poop. I don't know. Like it could have
Right,
been. So, and that's one thing that I find fascinating about society as a creative. Like, we're always busting down how people look at things, we're always presenting new angles, and that's what makes creative so fascinating. And yet, we exist in a society that's got very strict systems.
Now, for you, so you, in a question, when you decided to start Pony Friday, did you like go all in, or were you like, I'm gonna like dip my toe in it, do it as a side hustle, and then it gained some traction, and then you were like, okay, this might be pretty good.
I'm not very good at like tippy toeing into things. I kind of like go full tilt, which has its drawbacks, I will say. But I'm just not a like kind of tippy toe or halfway kind of thing. So I'd mentioned that Pony Friday, when I quit my job, I just kind of did contracts, but I called it Pony Friday.
Mm.
Because I wanted to have the most fun possible, and ponies and Fridays together seemed like the best combo. And so it was a reminder to me. And that first year, I just, anytime I took a contract, I told them I just didn't work Fridays. So I would
Oh
work
wow,
2
good
days
for
a week,
you.
or I would, like anything, but I was religious about not working on Fridays. And I think it was just to reset my brain and say, like, you're not just quitting your job to do the same thing. But I crept and evolved my path through trial and error. Like, I just didn't know. I just knew what I didn't want. So I didn't want to be stuck in an agency. So I quit. And then I didn't honestly know what I was going to do next, but I had a good enough reputation and there was enough work in my city that people just hired me really quickly for projects. And so
Mm.
it kind of bought me time. So I didn't really have to worry about thinking too hard about paying my mortgage or feeding my dogs. I just had to kind of keep pushing back, because one of the contracts I went in, and I was doing in-house work. So I'd go and I'd arrive at a desk, and one of them had business cards set out for me and an email account set out, and they really just were trying to hire me.
Oh
And
wow,
it
you're like, I'm just a contractor here. Yeah.
but what's funny about that is I felt like life was testing me to say,
Mm.
are you sure that you want to give this up? Yeah, and having to push back on that, because there's a strong pull to do what's more conventional. Like, I find it really fascinating that creatives can go through school fighting to do something unconventional and yet still end up in a 9 to 5 job. Like,
Right.
looking back, it blows my mind that as someone who sees themselves as a creative and a misfit still was in a 9 to 5 job for over a decade as a creative.
I know. And it's so weird because it's like, right, just by being a creative, you would think like you're thinking outside the box. You don't want to be in a cubicle, but probably the majority of creatives end up in a cubicle and at a typical 9 to 5 job. And I'm just making up a percentage. And then maybe 25% of them actually do something a little different, end up at like a really untraditional, 9 to 5, or starting a business for themselves, right? It's that
100%.
security.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and life tells us all the things that we need to have, right? There are a lot of people who are downsizing at the moment because they're realizing that the things that they're told that they need to make them happy and have a fulfilled life aren't actually doing any of those things.
Right. And then it's interesting. Sorry to I was interrupted you a little bit there, but I was like, yeah, it was kind of like testing you, because it's like knowing that somebody would pick you up full time, gives you that, like, well, do I want that security? Do I want, knowing I have like health insurance and, retirement and everything, like all taken care of by a company, and or do I really go out on my own? So what made you decide like, no, I can do this by myself?
Well, I don't know that I am always successful. So on a month-to-month basis, like there is definitely massive varied income. Sometimes I feel like I am making money like a rock star, and other times there is zero money. So I don't want to make anyone think that it's all consistent, because that is not true. But it felt like a trap to me. Like intuitively, it just felt like a trap, that the job that I had quit, that I was unhappy in, it felt like the same kind of system, right? So I would be just going back into it. And
Mm,
that to me just felt really dangerous. Like if you hated it, why would you choose that same sort of situation again? And it's hard because it's so appealing to go there, because it is stable. You know what you're doing, you know what your paycheck is. There's a different kind of stress, right? You're conforming to their culture at the different agencies. But it's for me, it was just kind of, well, am I pushing myself to grow, or am I going to accept these limitations, the constriction, and make peace with this way of life? Because I
mm,
wasn't making peace with it, right? I was frustrated and I had decided that wasn't for me. So to shift my mindset and, in my mind, settle,
mm-hmm.
that wasn't good. I didn't want to be there. And so every time someone's talked to me, and believe me, when months are terrible, a couple in a row for income wise or job wise, contracts, I do definitely apply for jobs occasionally, just to go through the like steps to remind myself, well, do I still want to be in the entrepreneurial fight? Do I
Mm.
still want that journey? Because sometimes even just looking at other jobs and thinking about like mentally placing yourself in a workplace can be enough
Yeah.
to remind you that that's not what you want.
Well, it's interesting too, and I'm not sure if it's the same for you because you have a team, right? Because some entrepreneurs that I talk to, they say some like the entrepreneurial life can be a little lonely sometimes. So that's why sometimes they even kind of want to go back to like just a regular job because then you at least have people versus like in your office by yourself, you know?
So I do have a team of people that helps me, but I am not in a business partnership. So everything falls back on me. Like
Mm,
I have
mm.
some intermediate designers and some uh, kind of junior designers who help me, and they're wonderful, but there have actually been some backlogs because I need to make decisions on stuff, and I'm the one who also has to like liaison with my accountant and make sure people are paid, and sometimes
Yeah.
responding to emails with creative feedback. There have been like massive delays because I just don't have the bandwidth to look at something and respond. And so, um, when you're part of an agency team, you're a specialist. You get to
Right.
do your job, and someone else is
That's
doing the
it.
other jobs.
Yeah.
And that can be super liberating and really nice and clean, right? It's simple and
Right.
you don't have to worry about the other stuff. Whereas there is a good amount of exhaustion that comes with just all the hats you're wearing.
And then, well, is your team virtual or do you guys like see each other every day?
So my team is, think of it like sporadic part-timers. I don't
Okay.
have like a big team that yet. It's my fantasy to have people working with me all the time. I think my life would be a lot easier. But we do pop-up shops with Pony Fridays because we have our merch, and so we have a shipping container. So I'm managing shifts when people are working, and so I have individuals who are more on kind of like the consumer relations sales force, I guess, like team that would go and do a pop-up shop. And often that's me and someone else, or I'll set it up and then someone else might be working it while I'm doing something else. And then I
Mm.
have a couple team members that work virtually, and then we'll occasionally have a chat just to make sure that we're on the same base. But often they're just emailing me stuff to check on. So, but I've tried to make them more specialized in their tasks. So I have one lady who's working specifically on different positions that the pony character could be in. So that's her job, and we go back and forth on that. And then it simplifies it. And then anytime he's in like a different environment or he's in a setting, I have someone else helping with those things. Just because I
Mm.
find that it's easier for them and it's easier for me if I know what their job is and what the ask was and they know what it is specifically for them, instead of,
Hmm.
oh, you have so many things to do and you don't know where to start.
Right. Yeah. And even for the listeners to, out there too, just to make sure, because I probably jumped the gun a little bit, because Pony Friday, from where it started, is different than what it is now. So, can you just tell the
Oh my
listeners,
gosh.
like, yeah, like about
I feel
Pony
like
Friday?
so pretend Pony Friday was born like a little baby and didn't know who he wanted to be. And so he did some contract work because he had to make some money. And then he decided that he would really like to inspire people with bold apparel. So he designed some clothes and started selling them. And he also decided he thought he could tell the world how life could be better if you just wanted to be bold enough to chase your dreams. So we've
Mm,
got some motivational blogs, and then um, and the last kind of 18 months, I started running Behave Boldly boot camps for entrepreneurs.
mm,
And that was easy because I've been in business. I get it. I have a background in marketing and branding. I've spent a lot of times working on big brands. And what I'm evolving that into is Behave Boldly boot camps for individuals. So it's not about your business, it's about you as a human, because people are stuck.
mm-hmm,
They're frustrated and they don't know what to do, and they haven't spent enough time with other individuals who are trying to break out of a cultural mold or a system, and actually have some time and space dedicated to figuring out their next bold move. So I'm transitioning those boot camps that I started, which was a great practice run to make sure that I could actually run a boot camp,
mm-hmm.
into something that's better for the everyday person who's stuck. Like that's
Yeah.
why we're selling merch and wanting to be part of the community. We've actually got a good partnership going with Pride, and I think we'll spend a lot more time supporting LGBTQ efforts in the future, because I really just wanted to be a stronger voice and actually help a cultural shift. Like, as a creative
Mm,
working in an agency, I was helping other people's bottom lines for big corporations. I wasn't changing the world. Like, I could pretend I was if I really wanted to skew my perspective and be really arrogant about it. But like winning a big award and helping somebody's bottom line for in a corporation isn't moving society forward.
mm-hmm.
And so I just felt like, as a creative living in my bubble, and I was having a lot of success in terms of how society might deem success with their ranking systems, but I didn't feel successful. I wasn't really happy. I felt like
Mm,
winning an award was the ultimate high and the ultimate low in the same moment.
mm.
You're like, what does this really mean? Nothing.
I think it's cool because at least with Pony Friday, it's you, right, making a decision. So you could figure out how you want to make that impact, how you want to influence this kind of like huge cultural shift we're going through as a society, like in the world, and do it kind of like in your way, and then kind of like putting your own stamp on it too. And I love your brand, like the pony. I feel like I know the pony personally.
I love that.
I'll see your Instagram post and like, oh, there he is, but so I just think like you have like such a unique way of figuring out how you want to help like this cultural shift. Even with your Behave Boldly, which I feel is helping other people figure out how they want to, influence culture and help with this shift too. Did the camp come before? I know you do like speaking engagements. Did you start doing the speaking engagements first, and then that's where you really like crafted the Behave Boldly and did the boot camp, or was it vice versa? You did the boot camp first, and then people invited you to do kind of talks based around it?
No, I did the talks first. And honestly, I think I was probably a little bit arrogant in the sense that people have to hear my message. But the reason that I really felt strongly about showing up, and the first one I did was in Calgary, which I'm a local, and that's where I've spent my creative career, is that I really just wanted to share a different perspective with my creative community and say, you know what? You know me. This is my career path, and this is what I'm doing now. And I just kind of wanted to dare them to think about a different option, because I knew that a lot of them were frustrated and a lot of them were miserable. And I just wanted to show up and share with them and say, this is what I'm doing. This is what I've done. This is what I'm going through. And just put that out there, because I find that so many people, when they go off on their own, they're just kind of like, bye-bye, and you never hear from them again. And it just resonated so well that I thought, well, okay, so I'll do a couple other speaking engagements and see how that goes. And they've gone well, because I tend to say something that opens someone else's mind up to a door that they had closed. So it's not really about me or my journey at all. It's about them realizing that they too have something that they wish that they were doing instead.
Yeah, it's like making the impossible possible. And it was never probably truly impossible, but for some reason, because people have some built up in their head, they're like, I can't do that. But then when you tell your story, they're like, well, maybe I can, you know?
Yeah, well, and it's like sharing that I gave myself permission to do something that it seemed a little risky, allows them to say, well, I could allow myself to do this as well. And even the dumbest things, like I have two dogs, and before I got my first dog, I told myself I could not have a dog until I had a yard. Well, I would have been waiting a long time if I didn't get over that.
Right. Right. It's like you figure out how to make it work within like for your situation, right? And then for people out there, because like with the listeners, I know I have a ton of listeners out there who, let's say they might be in a 9-to-5 job and they're like, you know what, I'm at that point where I'm ready to do something different, but kind of like that fear, is stopping them, or they're just like really comfortable. Like any advice for those folks? Like they have like an inkling of how they want to make their mark in the world. They're like, but I was told I go to school and then I go get this 9-to-5 and then I stay in it until I'm retired, and then maybe I could do something cool and different.
It's so fun. Yeah, this is like a 5-day conversation. But I would just say, look at your excuses. We're always shutting doors on ourselves. We're always making excuses as to why we can't do things. And people constantly come up to me and tell me why they're not doing things, like why they can't be an entrepreneur because they have a mortgage and kids, and they can't because of this or that. But I just kind of poke holes and ask, well, more important? Like, where are your priorities? Is it important for you to have, a 2,000 square foot home and two cars? Is it important for you to, save for your kids' education? Is it important for you? Like, all of those things are choices and priorities, and maybe those are legit your most important. And maybe it's worth being in a job where you make a ton of money so that your family can go on, month-long vacations every year. Or maybe you're willing to downsize. Maybe you're willing to, if you're in a relationship with two incomes, live off one of the incomes while the other person figures out what else. And the reason I also wanted to talk is most of the conferences I go to, everybody talks about doing a side hustle, and very few people will say, why not quit your day job and do
Mm-hmm.
side hustle money on the side? And you do have to change your priorities a little bit in the interim. You definitely have to look at what you want most, because they say you can have everything, you just can't have it all at once. And I think that's true. You kind of have to collect things along the way and realize what's important to you, like maybe it's not important for you to have own a home. Maybe it is, maybe
Mm-hmm.
it's not important for you to have, all the stocks you own or all the possessions. Like, maybe you don't need the new couch or the new clothes. Like, I don't know. Everybody's priority list is so different, but I've found that mine has changed.
Mm-hmm.
Like putting Pony Friday first along. So my top five are myself, my animals. I have two dogs and a horse, and Pony Friday. Like, that's my top five.
Oh wow.
And and I'm very, very focused on that. But in that top five, uh, isn't fashion. It's not
Mm.
travel. It's not a significant other. I do have one. He's lovely, but it's not like it's not my priority. And if I look at my business, like every day I need to do something for Pony Friday. Like, he has pushed me to do things that I never would have done, because
Mm.
I feel like it's, like I'm allowing that idea to just kind of catch fire and go wild. And
Mm-hmm.
that's great, but I've given it enough room to say, okay, I will show up. I will show up. I will try. I will apply for that speaking gig. I will go. And super uncomfortable.
Mm. Yes. Wow, I could just talk to you forever about this. Okay. So before we wrap up though, I'm curious too for you, like, as when you first decided to do this and things started to shift, another question that people always have is like, well, how am I going to survive? How am I going to make this work? They say you don't start to earn a profit for like sometimes 5 years in your business. How am I going to pay my bills? Like, how are you able to make it all work?
Well, it's different all the time, and it shifts. So right now I'm actually going through a big shift, and just like reassessing where my priorities are. When I first started, it was actually really easy for me to make a lot of money, but I was trapped still in the same job, right? I was still doing
Right.
contract work as a creative director or a copywriter, and I was stuck. So as soon as I started pushing those things off, I had more space to grow my business, which was awesome. But my income generating activities changed, and I wasn't making the same kind of big money. So
Mm.
I have been, I've cashed out some mutual funds, I've cashed out some stocks to make that work and push it. But I also am investing in myself, and my priorities have changed. Like,
Mm-hmm.
20 years ago, like, so I was 20. I literally had mutual funds to save for my kids' education. Like, I'm about to be 40 and I still don't have children. So, like, I,
You were really prepared.
no, but like, I had this like little saver mindset. And I, as a person, have changed, and my priorities have changed. And so I think that my advice would just be to look at what you are doing and question whether it's still in line with what you believe.
Mm.
Because beliefs change, priorities change, but often we forget to change our behavior along with them.
Completely agree. And I think too is like people get attached to all this stuff, right? And you really don't need all the stuff. Like you were saying, you don't need the multiple cars, you don't need the big house, you don't need every technology possible, you don't need every single cable channel, you don't, like if you really kind of figured out, what are the basics I need to survive, while still being happy, and what will it take in order for me to like do my passion or what I guess you love, then you can make it happen. It's just like taking the time to figure that out.
Well, and the other thing I would advise is keep investing in yourself. Like I've done a ton of personal growth. I've done speaking courses and going to conferences as an attendee still and meeting different connections and trying to push myself in different ways on an ongoing basis so that I can grow into the person that I need to be to own a bigger business. Like I think that Pony Friday can't grow beyond my personal ability to manage it,
Mm, mm,
which is
yeah.
scary because I'm sure that that's why we're still as small as we are. And being able to push through that is important. But I also, I've been very conscious about not having investors because I don't want somebody messing with the creative vibe and the path that we're on. But
Right.
that means that I need to be prepared to invest in it. So instead of me, doing something that maybe I kind of want to do, I maybe am buying merchandise or designing new line of stuff. And I think it's just about deciding what you want, like, and remembering that I'm turning 40 and that's young. And that's actually like your biggest earning potential, I think, starts around when you're 40. And so being
Yeah.
so attached to money up until that point, which I have been for sure, and thinking, well, I'm probably never going to retire because I love what I do. So, and even my parents, they're probably not going to retire until they're in their 70s
Mm.
because we're healthy individuals, right? Like we're living in a society where retiring at 60 is silly.
Yeah. Right, because people are staying like healthier longer, we're living longer, and so it's like you want to do something, right? Something that makes you happy. And so yeah, people are working longer. Some for that
Uh,
reasons, others to pay bills, right? But but
Totally.
people
But
are
I think
working longer. Yeah.
that's the thing, right? If you started working at something that you were happy at when you were younger, then you wouldn't care about needing to retire because you love what you do.
Right. Right.
So that's my personal philosophy. Like, let's just keep going. And
Right.
so, um, which means that my money is going into Pony Friday right now and not into a big retirement savings account. But that's a decision that I'm making based on the growth point I'm at in my business. And everybody makes a different decision.
And once you get to a certain point, you can always start investing and putting money back into retirement or whatever, because now, like, your business has scaled to the point where it's easy to do that, right? Because you've invested in it.
Totally.
Yeah. And then one other just quick rando question before we wrap up is your store. So you have like all these cool products. I'm just curious for you, did you, because you know how some people do like Redbubble or Society 6, so then they don't have to worry about keeping merchandise and then shipping it themselves. But it looks like you decided to like kind of sell it yourself through your site. And so why did you make that choice and how do you keep up with that?
How do I keep up with it is a really good question. At this point, we're so small that it's actually fine and achievable. But if we grow, I'm not sure what the solution is or
Okay.
when we grow. The and really one of the reason that I did that was just because I wanted to have more control over the experience. And It's funny how happy I am that I've done that because actually, as a consumer, I've had some poor shopping experiences online recently where I've made an order and two out of the three things have come, and I've
Mm,
tried to reach out to the company and they don't get a response. And honestly, that's why I just wanted people to have a good experience. I wanted them to be able to contact us if something went wrong. I wanted to have more control of how things were shipped, when they were shipped, like how things are made, the quality that's being sent out,
mm,
all of it.
mm-hmm. Yeah, just curious. Okay, so couple wrap up questions. First one is, how do you stay motivated?
This is a great question because this is my biggest struggle point right now. I have to say, and it evolves like at every point in your life, it's something different. And right now, I'm probably having the hardest time with that. And I think that I just need a few more friends in my network that have more bandwidth for when I need to talk to someone to motivate me. Because I
Mm,
currently have so many friends who are busy in their own entrepreneurial journeys, or they have kids and they're super busy. And so when I need something to fill my cup up, it's not always there. And
mm-hmm.
typically, I find walking my dogs and riding my horse to be fabulous on filling my cup back up to stay motivated. Like, really, just personal care is huge. So, the things that you need to do to stay happy, always do those things. But if you get kind of stuck, which I've found lately, and I'm sure that it's a combo of comparison to other people's Instagram accounts and a bunch of other, not so healthy habits of just like looking what other people are doing and then feeling like I was lesser, which is an unfortunate part of current reality that everybody is struggling with. Some people are jumping on a trend and seeing instant success. Like one of my
Mm-hmm.
friends is great at saying, you don't want to be a flash in the pan. You want to grow slow, you want to grow to sustain. And a lot of people talk about growing bamboo and how apparently a bamboo shoot has to grow roots for like 4 years
Mm,
before it
mm.
ever shoots up.
Yeah,
And just that you don't know how long it's going to take to grow your root system before you can shoot up.
that's
And
so true.
just knowing like you're on your own journey, and if you can look at what you're doing and be happy with that and stop playing comparison, it will be easier. But I have not succeeded in this. I'm still working on those skills.
Hey, we all are. And then, what is one thing that you can't live without?
Oh, I can't live without my animals. I really can't. They remind me that I'm just the person that feeds them. You know, having dogs in my home, and like I work from home, and so in my office, and just reminding me that life is now, and not to get so caught up in the craziness, or if somebody's upset with you, or if you have a little business crisis, it's not the end of the world. And I think that having something that grounds you is important. And for me, that's dogs.
Yeah, no, I think that is so true. And I try to tell people that everybody thinks sometimes like the smallest thing is a crisis, and I'm like, it's gonna be okay. Like you're gonna move past it. Yeah, you might be upset right now, or somebody might be upset with you, or you might think you've messed something up, or it might seem like it's the end of the world. The world is still spinning. It's gonna go on. Everything's gonna work out. Like just take a breath, right?
100%. Yeah.
And then also, can you tell the listeners just where to find you? Any social media handles, your website? all that good stuff.
I'm going to make this super, super easy. It's just Phony Friday on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and our website is phonyfriday.com.
Yeah, that's like the dream, right? You want everything
Totally.
consistent everywhere.
I have the dream.
Well, Elise, thank you so much for coming on here. I know people are going to love seeing the pony, meeting the pony, and no, just seriously learning from your experience. And, I hope it gives the folks that need it a good kick in the pants to like just take action and then make their mark in the world. So thank you so, so much for coming on.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much for having me. It has been a real treat, and I'm so, so glad you asked.
Okay, who's ready to behave boldly? I'd love to hear from you. Please comment on this poster on social media. Was this the push you needed to just do something that you've been itching to do, but maybe just too afraid to make the jump? I'd so love to hear from you. But anyway, I just want to read one quote from Elise while, as we wrap up here. And she says, "Look at what you're doing and question whether it's still in line with what you believe. Because beliefs change, priorities change, but often we forget to change our behavior along with them." So I think as we're less than 90 days to the new year, take a holistic look at your life, the job that you're doing every day, be it if you're a 9 to 5 or an entrepreneur. Look at how you're scheduling your time. Look at what you're doing on your weekends. Think about if you're happy or not and what is making you happy or not, and really figure out if there needs to be some changes in your life so you can live your best life. And if you find that you do need to make some changes, that a leap does need to be made, then it's time to start changing your behavior. It's time to start doing things that make you happy. And so, career wise, that can mean multiple things. It could be going from a 9 to 5 to being an entrepreneur. It could be 9 to 5 to starting that side hustle to ease you into it. It could be going from one 9 to 5 to another 9 to 5, but that other 9 to 5 is more aligned with what you're doing. It could actually be just changing positions at your current 9 to 5. Everybody is a little different. You just have to figure out what makes sense for you. And in order to do that, you really need to like write down the things that are important to you, really figure out like what makes you happy and what doesn't make you happy, and really figure out what you want to do in the future, in the near future, and then go for it. And some people might find like, you know what? I'm living my best life right now and it's great. And that's fine too. But if you do feel unhappy for some reason, really figure out what that behavior is that needs to be changed in order for you to at least be a little bit happier. Okay. Because one thing's for sure, like there's always going to be tough times. You're not going to be happy 24/7. You're just trying to get a little bit closer to just living your best life. So please show Elise some love. I hope you really enjoyed the episode. Please share it. Don't forget to subscribe and rate the podcast. And I will see you guys next week. Well, not see you, but I will be in your ear next week. All right. Have a great Columbus Day weekend and take care. Bye.